Hi, Charles the Book Sage here, and this is my Harry Potter reread. This is episode 2, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, chapters 6 through 9, the train from platform 9 3/4, the Sorting Hat, the Potions Master, and the Midnight Duel. If this is your first time watching, I am doing a reread for the first time of the Harry Potter series. I am doing it only on Sundays, spread out over 52 Sundays. And each Sunday I'm going to be reading a set of chapters and then recording a vlog that week of my impressions and my thoughts on my first time rereading these books. And I will link the playlist down below, and up above you can click the card here at the end of the video to go to the playlist and check out all the videos in the series. This is only episode 2, so pretty early on. Please like and subscribe. Click the little bell icon if you want to be notified of when my videos do get published. So for now, I will dive in to chapters 6 through 9. Now, we get a lot thrown at us in these 4 chapters. The first one here, the journey from platform 9 3/4, we meet a lot of people. Right up front, we meet the Weasley family. We're reintroduced to Draco, finally learning who his name is, and Crabbe and Goyle, and Hermione and Neville. And we're shown the trading cards of the wizards. We get a lot thrown at us here, but J.K. Rowling presents it really, really well and really smartly. And the opening of the chapter is Harry's basically spent from his birthday going to learning the wizarding world exists, going to Diagon Alley, getting all those supplies, and back home. And he spends the entire month of August waiting for September 1st to roll around and it's time to go to Hogwarts. And I happen to particularly enjoy Uncle Vernon's sort of malicious glee here when he takes Harry to the train station to show him that, there's no 9 3/4, and then leaves him there. And I always picture that later on that day, the Dursleys return to the train station expecting to find a forlorn Harry sitting there not knowing what to do, crying, only to discover he's gone. And I would have liked to have seen the look on Vernon's face when they realized Harry found his train and went after all. Totally unnecessary, not part of the books, no reason to show us. But I always just imagine that scene still takes place, even though it's not on page. But anyway, that aside left, let's jump right into platform 9 3/4. And here we get the Weasley family, and they help Harry get into the platform. Right away, Fred and George, right off the bat. Fred, my favorite of the two, took to them instantly. And then, of course, the rest of the family, and Percy, the prefect, and the special treatment, and the robe, and the owl. And then we get to meet Ron and Harry get to sit on the train and become friends. But before they get on the train, she takes the time, Rowling does, to show us Neville. We're introduced to Neville for the first time, Neville Longbottom. He's on the train platform looking for his toad. And I like the fact that she takes the time to throw Neville in there. Because even though he's mostly comic relief in a way, particularly in this first book, from what I remember, he is important to the overall story, to the end. And I like that we're shown him just as a little snippet, but we're shown him right away. And then, of course, we get Hermione on the train. We get Draco with Crabbe and Goyle. And we get a good insight here to, the insight is with Ron and the pressures of the family name, where the Weasleys are not a big, powerful family, but there's a lot of them. And all of Ron's brothers have accomplished big things at Hogwarts and gone on to careers. So they're definitely respectable in general terms, but not, of course, by the Malfoys and that whole crowd. But we see the pressure of a young son of a big family going to a prestigious school, having all of the burden of living up to his namesake being put upon him. And whether you want those expectations or not, they are there. and Ron is already worried about them at this point. And though Rowling doesn't touch on it, it's easy to make that leap and wonder just how much pressure Malfoy is under, how much pressure Draco's under. Because the Malfoys are one of the great houses, if you will, even though their name is a bit tarnished now because they had been on Voldemort's side. But Draco is the only child. So the entire expectation of the entire history of House Malfoy is on this 11-year-old shoulders. And that's really got to mess with your mind. So I'm keeping that in mind here as I'm reading, because I know Rowling wants us to not like Draco, wants us to hate Draco. Draco's the rival, the one Harry instantly is going to clash heads with. But taking Ron's scene where Ron is worried about his own reputation and living up to the name, I'm kind of going to take that on my own and apply it to Draco and to have it temper, because she never really touches on that for him here, at least not in these beginning books. I think not until much, much later in the series, if I remember correctly, we start to finally see that pressure on Malfoy and what he's been going through. But it has to still be right here. And I think it's part of why Draco is such an ass in many ways, because he has that expectation that he has to be. So, again, one of my things I've been most interested in this reread is Draco and how I'm going to take him. And I'm looking at how Rowling writes as well. I mean, that's part of my reread here, is to pay attention to the writing and what she takes the time to show us and how she takes the time to show it to us. And we see some of the things Rowling's really good at in this chapter. We get the chocolate frogs with the trading cards. And it's a cool, like, little thing. I don't want to use the word gimmick, but it's a cool little, like, quirk of the wizarding world that they have trading cards of all their famous wizards. And though oddly enough, there is not a Harry card, as far as I know, which just kind of struck me right now as I'm thinking about it. But anyway, the Dumbledore card, we get on the back a little, like, info dump in a very smartly presented way. We learn about Dumbledore stopping the Dark Wizard Grindelwald back in 1945. And we get the name Nicholas Flamel. So already here we get history of the wizarding world, that there are other dark wizards that have been there. We get a glimpse of Dumbledore and how powerful Dumbledore is. And we get foreshadowing and layering in of the plot of this book with Nicholas Flamel's name. And we also get to meet Scabbers, the Weasley family rat, which is now Ron has inherited from his brother. And again, this is one of Rowling's, like, talents as a writer. She's world building in this chapter. She's foreshadowing. She's laying plot points for this book and future books. Right here in a simple 2 11-year-old boys sitting on a train, eating candy and chocolates and talking to each other. And she does a really, really good job of weaving this stuff in very organically. A quick total aside to jump into George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire for a moment. That's a skill that Martin is really, really good at as well, is finding a way to organically world build without info dumps. The Bran chapters, from what I remember in particular, are really good chapters for world building, because Bran loved old Nan's stories. So Bran knows a lot of sort of versions of history. So his reaction to things that he's encountering as he leaves Winterfell and starts going on his journey, a lot of it's the stories from old Nan playing in his head, playing on his fears. So Martin is really good at using that kind of a mechanism to weave in world building and a lot of foreshadowing. And Rowling here in this book is really good at that as well, in her own way, that fits into this particular world. The trading cards is one of those things. And just, she's taken the time to layer in the important pieces in the series right here. Because then we also meet Hermione. And right away, I've been a big fan of Hermione since the moment she opened that car door and started talking to them. You know, she's got all her books. She's learned them all by heart. She knows all the lessons. She's trying to help Neville out. So she cares and means well. And then she can't help the way she comes across as kind of bossy and overbearing and everything. But that's part of who she is, and that's part of her defense mechanism. But you'll see, even in these couple of chapters, that you can learn everything reading in a book to a point, and then there's the doing in real life. And I think that's where Harry and Ron are a great balance for her. She's got all this book knowledge and desire to learn and accomplish things. And Harry just blunders everywhere head first. And Ron is like right there with you, buddy. So they're a really good team together, because without Hermione, Harry and Ron wouldn't have made it through the first year. I mean, they would have just gotten creamed in many ways, many more ways than one. And who knows how far Hermione would have got. I mean, she would have aced every test, done great on all her scores, all of that stuff, but would she have been missing that extra piece to take that book knowledge and put it into action the way she ends up doing? So I think, but we're seeing right away with the introduction of Hermione, we're seeing the book smarts died that Harry and Ron do not have. So we're seeing these pieces that are being kind of moved on a chessboard together and starting to click into place. And we also get Draco returns. We learn his name for the first time, Crabbe and Goyle. We're reminded again, we're not to like this kid. Harry and Draco's rivalry starts right there with the refusal to shake the hand. When Harry realizes, no, I'll take a Weasley over a Malfoy any day. And how different would the story have been? How different would Draco have been with them or with Harry if Harry had just shaken his hand? So, I mean, here is Harry Potter, the most famous, the boy who lived. And this is Draco Malfoy, old, important house. And here's this kid that's more famous than him. He shouldn't be. And he puts his hand out to Harry, and Harry basically tells him to screw off. So, as much of an ass as Draco is, Harry certainly doesn't do anything to temper that, to lessen it. Harry's right back at him, being as much of an ass as Draco is in many, many ways. Their personalities don't mesh well together. And it's interesting to see Harry, who spent so much of his life in a cupboard, kind of afraid to do almost anything because he's just constantly gets in trouble. But once he's unleashed and he's out here in the wizarding world, he's like, the whole rest of his personality is finally like flexing its muscles and stretching its legs. And he's enjoying himself, but we're getting that glimpse of James Potter's son here, even though we won't learn about James and what he was like, at least Snape's interpretation of James, until much later. But we're seeing, as a reread, you're seeing the personality of James kind of coming out a little bit. And it's an interesting dynamic between these two. And these are the two big egos. If you look at it, I mean, Harry and Draco, these are the two big egos of the first years, the 11-year-olds. They're the two pieces. And everyone else is going to form up around one or the other. But we still have Neville again. We have him, we have Hermione, we have Ron, all these other people. And Draco's got his Crabbe and Goyle, and then other Slytherins as they get sorted later. We're seeing all the pieces in these chapters begin to start to be set. That play out throughout the whole 7 books. So, again, I like this chapter. On the surface, it's Harry meets Ron, and they do a train ride to school. But there's a lot layered in here. And then when they finally arrive, and there's Hagrid again, and I like how we have the end of this chapter and the beginning of the next chapter, the Sorting Hat. We see Hogwarts and the professors, the school, really testing these first years. They're brought separate by themselves, put in the boats, and they're brought across the lake. So they're introduced to Hogwarts in its most majestic and grandest view. Like on purpose. This is meant to zap their heads, to really like put that feeling of awe on them and to see how they react. And we get a bit of this again at the beginning of the next chapter, where they're being tested, prodded. Like, how are you going to react to pressure and new things and challenges? And it is messing with their heads, but I think it's their part tradition, initiation, but also it serves a purpose because you're learning something really serious here at the school. And before you can even get in the door, you're already being challenged and tested. A quick note, too, on the train, we learn of the Hogwarts houses and the names Gryffindor and Ravenclaw and Slytherin, and how the Malfoys are Slytherins and were also tarnished a bit because they had been helping Voldemort, though claiming to be against their will and spellbound and everything. I don't think we get Hufflepuff's name until the Sorting Hat sings his Sorting Hat song, and that's now moving on to Chapter 7. Where they've arrived at the school now, and McGonagall shuffles them off into a room by themselves. Again, just kind of sticking them there to make them sweat and make them wait and make them wonder and make them nervous. And then, of course, the ghosts all swoop down and introduce themselves in their own, like, not even paying attention. Oh, la, la, la. Oh, there's kids here. Hello. You know, like, they weren't all doing this on purpose. And, again, this is the kids being tested and challenged by the professors, by the school, because they want to see what they're made of. And then we move into the Great Hall. And now, this is one little part that I take one issue with. Now, the descriptions here are wonderful. The Rowling's description of the Great Room itself, with the four huge tables for the houses, and then the whole teacher's table up on the dais at the top, and the vaulted ceiling with the candles floating in the air, and really beautiful, beautiful room. How could you not just want to go and spend time hanging out in that room? It's got to be pretty majestic, and deliberately so. But, and it is a mind-blowing moment for Harry, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that. Because, again, this is the kid who spent almost 11 years in a cupboard under the staircase. And just the entrance hall is bigger than the entire Dursley house. And then now this is the Great Hall. And I just think Harry adopted a little too quickly to it, for my taste. I mean, maybe not necessary to do, but maybe you could make a case that that's just part of Harry's personality, that we're seeing that Harry can be introduced to things that are so overwhelming but he can roll with them and roll with them quick. So I guess I could take it that way, but I would have liked to have seen that kind of hit Harry a bit harder. Because again, this kid spent 11 years in a freaking cupboard under the stairs. So to walk into a room like the Great Hall and to not just like break down to some degree, I just thought was a missed opportunity. But again, maybe it's just my interpreting it wrong, and I should take it that we're getting a glimpse of the strengths of Harry here. But it can go either way. But I just wanted to bring that up. And then, now for me here, we get the Sorting Hat and the Sorting Hat song, which never appears again. The movie completely ignored it. I like the Sorting Hat song because, again, a very smart little mechanism of world building by J.K. Rowling. We're formally introduced to the four houses and their personal quirks of what the houses are each known for. So, in a silly little Sorting Hat song that the Sorting Hat sings. And I like that because it's important information to have. And it's a cute, smart, slick way to give us that info without it being an info dump, without it being a boring history lesson on the houses of Hogwarts. And I don't know, maybe if J.K. Rowling just didn't like it or didn't feel it was necessary to repeat, because By book 2, we're learning enough about these houses to kind of, we don't need the Sorting Hat song anymore. So I don't know, but I like it. And the movie didn't have it, and the books never have it again. But it is what it is. A smart little mechanism of world building. And again, we get more foreshadowing here because the Sorting Hat takes a long time to sort Neville. And I didn't look it up before I started filming this, but I know there's a word for when the Sorting Hat has that problem sorting somebody. I'm sure someone can drop it in the comments. Let me know what that is. And I know there have been other people in history. I think McGonagall was one. The hat took a long time to sort. And we see that here with Neville. And when it's Harry's turn, we get the Sorting Hat talking to Harry. Now, in the movie, this is another big difference between the movie and the book. In the movie, everyone hears the Sorting Hat saying, "Not Slytherin, eh? You could be great, you know." But in the book, the hat's talking inside the hat only to Harry. Only Harry can hear this conversation. Everyone hears Gryffindor when he shouts Gryffindor, but no one else hears the conversation between the Sorting Hat and Harry. And I would love for Rowling someday to write what the hat was telling Neville when Neville was sitting there with that hat on his head. Because the Sorting Hat had to have been having a conversation inside that hat with Neville. And I would love to know what that conversation was. Again, nothing we needed to know here, because it may just give away too much. But I would just find it really, really interesting to know, what did the Sorting Hat say to Neville when he was taking so long to sort him? But it's another reminder here from Rowling that even though Neville plays the role of comic relief in a lot of ways in this book, he's important. The Sorting Hat recognized he's important and really took the time to make sure to put Neville where Neville really needed to be. And again, very smartly done here, and done very simply, very quickly, so that you might not notice it. It might just be, oh, it's one of the quirks of the hat, and she just happened to choose Neville. But once you finish the whole series, you know, no, there was a reason. And very smartly done on Rowling's part. And now here's where things start to get interesting for me for the chapter. We get to see Professor Quirrell for the second time. And Quirrell is now wearing the turban. Because in Diagon Alley, the Leaky Cauldron, where Harry first met Professor Quirrell with Hagrid when he was being taken to Diagon Alley on his birthday, Quirrell's not wearing a turban. And Quirrell's still nervous and jittery and stuttery, but he reaches out and he shakes Harry's hand at the Leaky Cauldron. And now we see him a month later, and he's got the purple turban on. And I don't know why they changed that in the movies, because in the movies he was already had the turban on, wouldn't touch Harry in the Leaky Cauldron. But that was and to me that's a big major change from the books, because the turban's presented silly, but Harry pays attention to it enough for that you as a reader should notice that it's important. Something's happened, and that for Quirrell to now be wearing this turban out of the blue. Something's different. Something's changed. And we had learned, I think, that Gringotts was robbed. I think on the train somebody mentioned it. And now Quirrell with a turban on. So in that month where Harry's been just wallowing away in the Dursleys between July 31st, his birthday, and September 1st, the start of school, a lot has been happening out in the Wizarding World. And Harry, of course, not yet part of the Wizarding World, really yet, at that point, doesn't know about it. But between Gringotts being robbed and now something's happened to Quirrell, you realize that Voldemort's been planning things for a long time, but the day Harry turned 11 and was officially brought into the Wizarding World with his Hogwarts invitation is the same exact day that Voldemort began to take action again. So things have been building for a long time over those 11 years, and the same moment Harry's reintroduced is the same moment Voldemort has his people begin. And again, a little just quirky thing, purple turban out of the blue, but if you're paying attention, particularly in a reread, this is, now something happened in the month of August. And then separate from that, now we get Dumbledore. And this is one of the weird things about this, particularly this first book for me. I mean, Dumbledore is the greatest wizard in the world. He's got this reputation. He hunted down Grindelwald, the old dark wizard. He's done all these things. And yet here he is, Nitwit, Blubber, Oddman, Tweak, his speech to all the new students to kick off the year. Just incoherent babbling. And I always thought it was really weird that Rowling presents him as really kind of silly. It's like, and I wonder why did she present him as such a silly old little man here at this point? Because he's not at all. He's smart. He knows what's happening. He's paying attention to everything. He's pushing, prodding things to get into the right positions on that chessboard as well. But outwardly, he's acting like kind of a bumbling fool, which I just thought was a bit weird for her to be so over the top silly with the guy. And it goes away pretty quickly. I don't remember him being this silly in book 2, but again, I only read the books once and it was a whirlwind read, like many years ago. So I'm curious to see when Dumbledore stops being this goofy old wizard and starts becoming the serious Dumbledore that dominates the second half of the series. But here he really is kind of ridiculous. And I just thought it always struck me as a bit odd. And I don't know if that was her just trying to be quirky just to be quirky, or if Dumbledore is just acting the fool on purpose to lull his enemies into, not worrying so much. That they don't have a lot to worry about. Dumbledore is kind of getting old and senile. He's not a threat anymore. I don't know if that's part of it, and we're just seeing the silly facade he presents, not knowing what's behind it. So I don't know. But he was really particularly silly here. And then, of course, we get the school song, which everyone sings in whatever tune they want it to be. So it's this cacophonous mess. And I particularly like Fred and George turning it into a slow funeral march that takes longer than anybody else to finish, and how it pleases Dumbledore immensely to the point where he's conducting the two of them at the end when they're the only two left singing. I quite like that. Again, she finds a way to work humor in, and just funny little moments like that. And again, it's Dumbledore just being kind of silly Dumbledore, but it works with Fred and George for me. And then probably the most interesting part of this chapter, of chapter 7, is Harry's dream at the end of the chapter when they're finally up in bed in the Gryffindor rooms, where Harry dreams that he's the one wearing the purple turban, and he keeps hearing a voice telling him that he has to transfer to Slytherin, that that's where he needs to be, that things need to get done and he needs to be in Slytherin. And the voice, and it's kind of mirroring the Sorting Hat, where the Sorting Hat was having a conversation with him in his head, and now here he is wearing the purple turban, and the turban's telling him that you need to be in Slytherin. And then he sees Snape and Malfoy and the green flash of light, which is his only memory from the night his parents were killed and Voldemort tried to kill him. And again, great little moment, little snippet, and then by the morning, Harry doesn't even remember he had the dream. But again, that purple turban, she's making sure, she's pointing it out if you can catch it. I didn't catch it necessarily my first time reading this, because again, I just read it so quickly. But here, it's where she's letting us know that that purple turban and, Voldemort, he's there already, and already starting to talk to Harry, already starting to, that connection to Harry's already there. Because when we meet Snape for the first time in the Great Hall before this, Snape looks at Harry, and Harry's scar instantly burns, and just for an instant. And that's the first time that happens to Harry, and when Snape looked at him. And this dream, I think, is a continuation of that. That bond with Voldemort is there, and it's waking up. So, again, so much in these first chapter 6 and 7 right here from Rowling. Really, really layering in a lot. And then we get chapter 8, The Potions Master, and Harry's first actual day of classes, and the weirdness of everyone staring at him, everyone kind of following him around and looking at him because he's so famous. And then there's just the challenges of getting around Hogwarts itself. And we learn about Hogwarts, and the staircases move, and doorways are hidden, and walls disguise themselves as doorways to trick you, and the ghosts mess with you, and Peeves in particular, who's really nasty. He's a poltergeist, not a ghost, and this is a really nasty, nasty little dude. And then, of course, Filch and his cat. And again, we're reminded of the off-limits corridor because they stumble upon it thinking they're trying to get to a class. And Filch, of course, doesn't believe them, which right away sets them on Filch's radar as he's going to mess with these kids for their entire time in Hogwarts now because they pissed him off right away. And it's a good introduction to the school itself and its uniqueness and its quirkiness. And then we get Professor Snape, the Potions Master. And this is an interesting chapter because this is our first real interaction with Snape. And it's Rowling, she goes out of her way to make sure you don't like Draco, and she really goes out of her way to make sure you don't like Snape. Because Snape humiliates Harry here, deliberately, and enjoys every moment of humiliating him. It'd be interesting to see, what if Harry had been sorted into Slytherin? How would Snape have treated Harry? Because that would have put Snape in a really weird position, because his personal issues with Harry being the son of James and Lily, and everything that he's got built up in him because of that he takes out on Harry throughout Harry's time at Hogwarts. How would Snape have handled that had Harry been a Slytherin, where there would have been that almost conflict of interest, because being Slytherin, he wants Slytherin House to win, and what would that have done to Snape if Harry had been part of his own house? Would that have made things even worse? Would that made his not hatred of Harry, but him taking it out on Harry even like worse than it is here with Harry being in Gryffindor? I don't know. Of course, that's something we would never get to see, but just something I like to think about here of how would Snape have treated Harry had Harry gone to Slytherin. And again, it's just our introduction to Snape, introduction to potions, which comes into play later multiple times in this series. And, of course, the Slytherins and how you don't like them, and Draco and Snape, Snape and everything. It's Rowling setting the stage here, setting the rivalries, setting the challenges. And we also get, though, after that, we get that balanced out with Hagrid and Hagrid's cottage and his dog, his big hound. And, of course, the mystery of the book itself begins to form again here, because Harry sees the newspaper, and we're talking about Gringotts and the attempted theft. And we're reminded of that again, and again, the central mystery of the book in what was it in that vault that Hagrid took for Dumbledore? And why are people trying to steal it? And it's now planted firmly in Harry's mind that this is something he needs to figure out. And we also realize, though, that by asking about Snape, Hagrid knows the past. And Hagrid doesn't want to talk about it, and he won't kind of look at Harry, and there's a little hemming and hawing between what was in the vault and Snape and the past history, knowing that Snape's humiliation of Harry is personal and deliberate, because Harry is Harry. And we're getting the first glimpse of that here, that Snape's not just an ass. It's not just a bad person, that it's very personal with Harry specifically. And again, really quick chapter, but really well done on Rowling's part for the most part. Other than a little bit overboard in that you're not to like Snape, you're not to like Draco bit, but it is what it is. And I just love the introduction of Hagrid's cottage, and that this is their little escape where they can go there to blow off steam and get away from everything. And how Hagrid is so welcoming to Harry, and now Harry's friends, because Ron gets to tag along here and meet Hagrid formally. And then we come to chapter 9, the last chapter for this episode, and the Midnight Duel. And following on the heels of how Snape is presented as someone who clearly has a vendetta against Harry, or at least Harry believes he does, we get more Draco. And this is one of my favorite chapters as well. We get the broomsticks. And, of course, Draco showing off how good he is at flying, and he's been doing it for years. And we then get Neville being Neville and breaking his wrist, and the teacher has to go off. It's Neville more of just comic relief at this point. But, and then we get Draco and Harry. And here we see, in a way, Harry's pedigree on display. Harry is the son of James Potter and Lily Potter. And James was a seeker, and we don't learn that here. We learn that later. And at least if my memory serves. But Harry instantly takes to flying. We finally see what Harry's the natural at, which surprises Draco and surprises everybody, that Harry just instantly takes to the broom without, he knows instinctively what to do with it and how to fly it. But we see the Draco-Harry rivalry really kick into high gear here. And you're getting your first look at that Draco may be an ass, but Draco's smart, and Draco pays attention, and Draco's already learning what buttons to push on Harry to get Harry to overact, to get Harry to be emotional instead of intellectual. And Draco can get emotional too, but Draco's a lot smarter than Harry at this point in the story, because Draco pays attention a lot more than people give him credit for. But because he is who he is, because he likes to lord things over people, he's been trained by his family to learn, to watch for weaknesses, and to manipulate them, and manipulate people through their weaknesses. And he's good at it already here, even at 11 years old. It's an interesting dynamic, because Harry right now he just wants to prove himself. He's hot-headed, a lot like his father in a way. And we're seeing part of Harry's the special kid, the chosen one of the story in a way. Some of that's here. But it is an effective chapter, because we also see, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Neville, that nucleus in their own way forming. And even though through most of the story it's Harry, Ron, Hermione, Neville is right up front, right here with them in this chapter when they get themselves into what could have been really serious trouble later. Because Harry's chosen to be the Seeker. Big moment. This unprecedented thing. And Harry's lucky here that he happened to be really good at doing that. Otherwise, he would have been in some serious trouble. But more importantly than Harry being the Seeker and, all that stuff, is we start to see personalities forming here. Hermione starts to assert herself. And Ron starts to slide into the buddy role, where he's Harry's wingman. Ron's starting to slide into that role here. And Hermione's sliding into the voice of reason role, where she's understands and recognizes that your actions have consequences, and not just to yourself, but to your friends, to your house. You're going to end up hurting a lot of people you're supposed to be helping. And again, you see that balance between the personalities, and they're starting to slide into what their roles are going to be with each other, what that dynamic's going to be. We see the real first inklings of it here. And of course, Neville kind of getting thrown in with them, where, again, Neville's importance. And even though he's just kind of there and here and there and comic relief in a lot of ways, but there are certain moments here where she makes sure Neville's present, even though he's not a major player yet in any of these events, but he's there at the beginning as this nucleus is forming, even though he's more in the orbit of it throughout the series. But it's important that he is there as that nucleus is starting to develop, because he is, in his own way, as important as Harry. And had Neville's personality been different, a bit more focused and dynamic, who knows what that dynamic would have been, because he would have been an equal part. It would have been 4 of them instead of 3 of them with him in orbit. He would have been an equal part of 4 very strong kids. But circumstances are what they are. He grew up the way he grew up, with living in the tragedy of his parents, and not even knowing he had any magic until 8 years old. Similar to Harry in some way, where it didn't manifest itself until much later, apparently, than a lot of wizarding kids. But again, you get a glimpse of what could have been here had Neville just been a slightly different person, personality-wise. But at least she makes sure to include him in this opening part. And again, this is Draco being smarter, manipulating, setting Harry up to get Harry in trouble. Harry's friends being dragged along with him, taking that risk, or basically they're going to get the punishment, even though Harry's the one forcing the action. And I like this scene because it is Harry being outsmarted, and it's Hermione recognizing it and making note of it and trying to pay attention to it and trying to get them to understand that they have to be smarter if they're going to succeed. And of course, then it's the mad dash trying to get away from Filch, and they end up in the Forbidden Corridor. And there's the big, giant, 3-headed dog. And again, right after the mystery being raised in Hagrid's cottage of what's in that vault, what's in that package, now we see, okay, and it's Hermione again, the one who spots it. The dog is guarding a trapdoor. There's something in there. That's the dog's purpose. It's a guard. That's why the corridor is forbidden. There's something in there that they're trying to keep safe. And that's when Harry then realizes that has to be where the package from Vault 713 is. And again, I love this chapter because we get a lot thrown at us again. We get Harry and Draco's battle. We get Harry's natural ability on the broomstick, him being a seeker. We see Harry, the good parts and bad parts of Harry. We see Hermione's dynamic of being the level-headed person, actually paying attention to what's happening. And again, they wouldn't have gotten very far without Hermione. They would have just gotten themselves killed probably, and probably pretty quickly without Hermione. Or worse, as Hermione puts it, expelled. Which is one of my favorite parts of the little chapter, is that being expelled to Hermione is worse than dying. But a very, very effective chapter. And again, I like this little section of the book here, from the train ride to discovering the trapdoor being guarded by the dog. We really get a lot thrown at us, but very smartly done on Rowling's part. Very layered in, world building, foreshadowing, plot set in motion, personalities coming to the fore, dynamics being formed, group dynamics, and her taking the time to just drop in little reminders of Neville. Like, don't forget him. So I really enjoyed this, like episode 2. These chapters I really, really like. So great setup chapters for the actual central mystery and story here. And now next week is going to be chapters 10 through 14. Halloween, Quidditch, The Mirror of Erised, Nicholas Flamel, and Norbert, the Norwegian Ridgeback. So I'm really looking forward to those. Lots of good things in those chapters here. We're going to get our first, holiday at school with Halloween. We get our first Quidditch match going on. And we really get everything set in motion in this next section next week. And then the following week will be the last 3 chapters of the book. So this first book is going to go by pretty quick. It's a shorter book. But I'm really, really, really enjoying this reread. I'm actually happy now that this is week 2 and I have 2 Sundays under my belt. I think I'm really going to enjoy doing it this way, of breaking it up just a Sunday at a time over a year. It really lets me slow down and pay attention and take a look at the story and just not enjoy the story as well, but also pay attention to Rowling and how she's crafting it and presenting it. And so I'm actually really excited and happy already, just 2 weeks in, that I'm doing it this way. And I'm looking forward to the next 50 weeks after this of working my way through the rest of this series. And I hope I didn't ramble on too much. I hope it wasn't too incoherent. I hope there are things here you thought were interesting. I want to hear from you in the comments of what you thought of these particular chapters 6 through 9. I really want feedback. I want to kind of have a discussion about this story and about these books and about these chapters. If there are points that you want to bring up that I missed, please let me know in the comments, because I want to hear your interpretations of them as well, not just my own. And so a reminder, next Sunday I'm going to be reading chapters 10 through 14 of the Sorcerer's Stone, and I will see you then. Until then, this is Charles of Sir Bookstage, and happy reading.